What if I told you that everything you believed about surviving winter in the Wild West is wrong? We are used to thinking of winter as an enemy that must be defeated with technology and brute force. But for the indigenous peoples of North America, winter was not a battlefield, it was home, with its own laws and rules. They did not fight the cold but cooperated with it, using snow and ice as tools and shelters. Their knowledge was honed by thousands of years of observation, where every snowflake and wind direction carried valuable information. It was a philosophy not of conquest but of harmony, where survival depended not on strength but on wisdom. Watch this video to the end, and you'll learn how ordinary moss could replace the warmest shoes and why the best way to stay warm is to build a house out of what makes you cold. What I am about to show you is forbidden in the modern world because it makes you think differently. The main secret of indigenous people's survival was not a set of techniques, but a special attitude towards winter. They did not perceive it as a hostile force to be defeated, but as a special state of the world to which one must adapt. This approach changed absolutely everything, from the way they moved to their hunting methods. Instead of wasting precious energy fighting the snow and wind, they learned to use them to their advantage. Deep snow became not an obstacle, but a building material for a warm shelter. They understood that winter was a time of silence, slowing down, and conserving energy. Every unnecessary movement, every careless step could be too costly. Therefore, their survival was based on the principles of minimalism and efficiency, honed to perfection. Observation was their main tool, replacing maps and compasses. They read the snow cover like an open book, seeing animal tracks, determining safe routes, and predicting weather changes. The snow told them everything they needed to know. This way of thinking allowed them not only to survive the winter, but to live fully in it. They found food, built warm dwellings, and traveled long distances. The winter forest was not a frightening desert for them, but a home full of resources. A modern person finding themselves in such conditions would first try to build a huge fire. An indigenous person, on the contrary, would look for a way to keep their body warm with minimal effort. This fundamental difference in approach is the key to their success. They knew that the main enemy in the cold was not the cold itself, but moisture. Wet clothes in the cold are a sure path to death. Therefore, all their technologies, from clothing to shelters, were aimed at staying dry. Do you think modern humans have completely lost this intuitive connection with nature, or can it still be restored? Share your opinion in the comments. I'm very interested to hear your point of view. Want to know the secret that allowed them to move through the deepest and loosest snow without sinking? When we imagine snowshoes, we picture long, tennis racket-like structures, but for hunting in the dense forests of the eastern woodlands and the subarctic, the Iroquois and Cree used a completely different, much more effective model. They were called bear paws because of their characteristic shape, almost round or teardrop shaped. Unlike long snowshoes designed for open plains, these were short and wide. This design gave them a huge advantage in the forest. The main advantage of the bear paw was its incredible maneuverability. With them, it was easy to turn on the spot, step over fallen trees, and maneuver between closely spaced trunks. Long snowshoes would constantly get caught and get in the way in such conditions. The base was a frame made of strong and flexible wood, such as ash or birch. The branch was steamed over a fire, bent into the desired shape, and the ends were tied together. The result was a lightweight and very durable frame. The interior of the frame was filled with a weave of strips of rawhide. The weave was dense enough to support a person's weight, but with holes so that snow would not accumulate, but fall through. This prevented snow from sticking and weighing down the snowshoe. The attachment to the foot was also thought out to the smallest detail. A simple system of leather straps allowed the snowshoe to be securely fixed to the moccasin, while leaving the foot sufficient freedom of movement. This reduced fatigue during long walks. The use of such snowshoes allowed the hunter to move through the forest almost silently. He did not sink into the snow with a loud crunch, but glided smoothly over its surface. This gave him a decisive advantage when tracking cautious prey. But how can you remain unnoticed when every breath you take in the cold turns into a white cloud? In the next chapter, I will reveal the most closely guarded secret of silent hunting, which seems like real magic. I will reveal the best-kept secret that you have definitely not heard of. In extreme cold, when temperatures dropped to minus 30 or 40 degrees, hunters in the subarctic had a unique advantage. They could literally see their prey's breath from a great distance. In such severe cold, the warm, moist air exhaled by animals does not simply turn into vapor. It instantly crystallizes, forming a clearly visible cloud of tiny ice crystals. This cloud hangs motionless in the frosty air for several seconds. An experienced hunter, standing on high ground, scanned not the forest line itself, but the space above it. He was not looking for the dark silhouette of an animal against the white snow, but for these short, rhythmically appearing white flashes. This allowed him to spot his prey long before it could notice anything. This method required incredible patience and sharp eyesight. It was necessary to be able to distinguish a cloud of breath from dust blown off the branches by the wind. But for those who mastered this art, the forest became transparent. Having determined the location of the animal by its breath, the hunter could begin to stalk it from the leeward side. He knew exactly where his target was, even if it was hidden by trees or folds in the terrain. This turned hunting from a game of luck into a precise calculation. This technique was especially effective at dawn or dusk. In the slanting rays of the low sun, these icy clouds were illuminated, becoming even more visible against the dark forest. It was an incredible sight, both beautiful and tense. Such hunting was the pinnacle of skill and fusion with nature. It was only possible on certain, very cold days. The hunter had to know the habits of the animals perfectly in order to guess what he was seeing and whether the animal was calm based on the rhythm and size of the clouds. In essence, the hunter became part of the winter landscape. He used its features as naturally as we use a navigator in the city. It was a complete immersion in the environment, understanding it on an intuitive level. Are you ready to learn the truth about how to keep warm by burying yourself in the snow? When a blizzard caught a hunter or traveler far from home, he did not have time to build a complex shelter. He needed to quickly, and with minimal energy expenditure, create a space that would protect him from the wind and frost. The simplest and most ingenious solution was a snow trench or snow burrow. To build it, they needed nothing but snow and snowshoes, which were used as shovels. The main thing was to find a suitable place, a large snowdrift or a slope swept by the wind. The idea was to use the unique property of snow, its thermal insulation. Freshly fallen snow consists of 90–95% air trapped between snowflakes. This immobile air is one of the best natural insulators. The construction was extremely simple. A narrow trench was dug in a deep snowdrift, slightly wider than a person's shoulders and as long as a person's height. The depth had to be such that it was possible to lie down and shelter from the wind. After the trench was dug, it had to be covered with a roof. Spruce branches, skis, or snowshoes were used for this purpose. A thick layer of loose snow was thrown on top of this covering, which created the main insulating layer. The entrance to such a shelter was usually closed with a block of snow or a skin. Inside, even without an additional heat source, the temperature was significantly higher than outside. Thanks to the heat of the human body, it could be kept around 0 degrees, while outside it was raging 30 degrees below zero. It was a temporary but very effective shelter. It allowed people to wait out the worst of the blizzard, conserving their strength and warmth. It took no more than half an hour to build, which was critical in an emergency. But how could you keep warm inside the shelter when you were only wearing leather clothes? In the next chapter, you will learn about a natural material that was worth its weight in gold and was better than any modern insulation. One of the most valuable resources in the winter forest was not fur or leather, but inconspicuous sphagnum moss. This marsh dweller had unique properties that made it an indispensable material for insulating shoes and clothing. The peoples of the north valued it like gold and harvested it in large quantities during the warm season. The main property of sphagnum is its incredible hygroscopicity. It can absorb 20 times its own weight in moisture while remaining dry to the touch. This property made it an ideal insole for moccasins. Feet inevitably sweat in shoes, and this moisture instantly cools the foot in the cold, leading to frostbite. Sphagnum moss, placed inside the moccasin, worked like a modern high-tech material. It absorbed all the sweat, leaving the foot completely dry. Once collected and dried, the moss became soft and elastic, like a sponge. It not only absorbed moisture, but also created an additional air layer that retained heat perfectly. Feet in such moss socks remain warm and dry even in the most severe frost. In addition, sphagnum moss has pronounced antiseptic properties. It contains substances that prevent the growth of bacteria. This was extremely important for the prevention of skin diseases and infections during long hikes. Moss was harvested in summer and autumn, collecting it in swamps. It was then thoroughly dried in the sun and stored in a dry place. Before use, the dry moss was kneaded in the hands to make it softer. This natural insulator was completely free and available to everyone. You just needed to know where to find it and how to harvest it properly. This knowledge was as important a part of survival culture as the ability to hunt. Modern tourists and survivalists are rediscovering this amazing material. It proves that nature has already created the perfect solutions for the most difficult tasks. You just need to be able to see them and apply them correctly. What if I showed you a technology that made hunters completely silent and allowed them to climb snowy slopes effortlessly? To move through deep snow, the peoples of the north used not only snowshoes, but also skis. However, their hunting skis had one unique feature that made them the perfect tool for tracking prey. The sliding surface of these skis was lined or covered with camas, a skin from the legs of an elk or deer. The secret was that the pile on this skin had a strict direction. This created an effect that cannot be replicated with modern materials. When moving forward, the pile lay in the direction of glide, and the ski rolled easily over the snow. But when trying to move backward, for example, when climbing a hill, the pile stood on end and clung to the snow. The ski stopped dead, preventing the hunter from sliding down. This feature allowed movement over rough terrain without the use of poles. It was possible to climb fairly steep slopes simply by stepping on skis. This freed up the hands for weapons and significantly saved energy. But the main advantage of the fur lining was its silence. Unlike bare wood or plastic, which creak and rustle in the cold, the fur glided over the snow completely silently. A hunter on such skis moved like a shadow, without making a single sound that could scare away sensitive prey. Making such skis was a great art. It was necessary to select the right wood, bend it, and then carefully fit and attach the canoe. This knowledge was passed down from father to son and was highly valued. These skis were wider and shorter than modern cross-country skis, which provided better stability on loose snow. They were designed not for speed, but for stealthy and confident movement across hunting grounds. They were a tool for work, not for sport. But how do you protect your eyes from the blinding sun when you're surrounded by miles of white snowy desert? The answer to that question is in the next chapter. In a world where everything around is covered with dazzling white snow, one of the main dangers was not frostbite, but snow blindness. This is a painful burn of the cornea of the eye caused by ultraviolet rays reflected from the snow. A person affected by this ailment became completely helpless. To protect themselves from this threat, the indigenous peoples of the Arctic and subarctic invented a simple but incredibly effective device: snow goggles. They did not have lenses in the modern sense. Their secret lay in their design.
That's just right.
The glasses were a narrow strip of wood, bone, horn, or even leather. One or two narrow horizontal slits were cut into this strip at eye level. The entire structure was attached to the head with a leather strap. The principle of operation was based on a sharp reduction in the amount of light entering the eyes. The narrow slit acted as a diaphragm, cutting off most of the blinding rays while maintaining a sufficiently wide angle of view. This allowed the wearer to navigate confidently in space. This design not only protected against ultraviolet rays, but also improved visual acuity in bright light, working on the principle of a pinhole camera. The image became sharper and more contrasted. The hunter could better see the details of the terrain or spot prey from a distance. The manufacture of such glasses did not require complex technology. They could be carved with an ordinary knife from a piece of wood or bone found along the way. Their simplicity and accessibility made them an indispensable part of winter equipment. The shape and size of the slit were selected individually. An experienced craftsman could make glasses that perfectly fit the owner's face and provided optimal protection and visibility. They were often decorated with carved ornaments, turning a utilitarian item into a work of art. Modern mountaineers and polar explorers use high-tech glasses with UV filters, but the principle remains the same: protecting the eyes from excessive light. The invention of ancient hunters continues to serve the same purpose today, proving its timeless effectiveness. Surviving in winter meant not only being able to obtain food, but also being able to preserve it. In conditions where hunting could be unsuccessful for many days, creating reserves was a vital task. And here again, snow came to the rescue, turning from a problem into an ideal natural freezer. The principle was simple. Anything that needed to be preserved had to be buried deep in the snow. The low temperature of the snow cover reliably protected meat or fish from spoiling. It was a simple and completely free method of preservation. To create such a refrigerator, or snow cache, a place with deep, dense snow was chosen, often in the shade of trees to protect it from the spring sun. A hole was dug in the snow, and fir branches were laid at the bottom to insulate it from the ground. Then food supplies were placed there. The pit was also covered with spruce branches and then covered with a large amount of snow. The snow was carefully compacted to make the storage inaccessible to predators, such as wolverines or foxes. The compacted snow froze into a dense crust that was difficult to break through. In order not to forget the location of their storage, they marked it with some kind of sign: a broken branch, a stone, or a notch on a tree. Each family had several such hiding places in the area of their hunting grounds. This was their guarantee in case of famine. This method of storage had several advantages. First, it was completely reliable in terms of preserving the freshness of the food. Meat frozen in the snow could be stored for months without losing its quality. Second, it was safe. The smell of food did not spread through the forest, as it was securely sealed under a thick layer of snow. This did not attract unwanted attention from predators to the camp or encampment. Thirdly, it meant that they did not have to carry all their supplies with them. Hunters could travel light, knowing that at a certain point along their route, a food cache awaited them. It was a whole system of distributed logistics based on knowledge of the terrain. This simple and wise technology allowed people to feel confident during the harshest months of the year. It gave them stability and confidence in the future. It was the foundation of their winter well-being. The most important skill for survival in winter was not the ability to build a fire or construct a shelter. The most important skill was the ability to read the snow. For the indigenous people, the snow cover was not just a white mass, but a huge and constantly updated map full of the most important information. They could determine the weather for the next few hours based on the nature of the snow. For example, if the snow became sticky and moldable, it meant that warmer weather was approaching. Dry and crumbly snow that crunched underfoot, on the other hand, foreshadowed a cold snap. Snow was the best diary of forest life. It bore the tracks of all the animals that had passed by in the last few hours or days. An experienced tracker could determine not only the species of an animal from its footprints, but also its sex, age, speed of movement, and even whether it was injured or frightened. They knew how to read the direction of the wind by the snow waves on the surface of the snow cover. This helped them navigate in a blizzard when neither the sun nor other landmarks were visible. The relief of the snow cover always indicated where north and south were, if you knew how to look at it. They chose the optimal route based on the depth and density of the snow. They avoided deep and loose snowdrifts, preferring to move on snow that could support their weight. This allowed them to save a tremendous amount of energy during long journeys. Snow also revealed hidden dangers. For example, darkened or sunken snow above a river indicated that the ice was thin in that spot. A particular type of snow cover could indicate a hidden hole or crack beneath it. This knowledge was complex and included meteorology, zoology, and physics. It was accumulated throughout life, starting from childhood. Children learned to read tracks just as we learned to read letters. The ability to read snow was the basis for all other skills. Without it, it was impossible to hunt successfully, move safely, or find the best places to camp. It was the foundation on which the entire system of winter survival was built. This art is almost lost today. We look at a snowy landscape and see only a white desert. They looked at it and saw a living, dynamic, and informative picture of the world. To sum up, we can identify one main principle that unites all the technologies and techniques described. It is the principle of minimum effort to achieve maximum results. Every action, every invention was aimed at conserving the most valuable resource in winter: energy. Building a snow trench required much less effort than building a hut out of branches. The use of snowshoes saved energy by preventing people from sinking into the snow. Hunting for breath allowed them to avoid long and exhausting pursuits. This principle permeated their entire lives. They did not try to remake nature to suit themselves, but integrated themselves into existing processes with the least resistance. They went with the flow of winter life rather than against it. Their clothing was light and did not restrict movement, but at the same time was very warm due to its multi-layered nature and the use of the right materials. Their dwellings were compact so that they were easier to heat. Their tools were simple but multifunctional. They understood that any loss of energy was a direct threat to life. Wasted calories were very difficult to replenish in the conditions of winter hunting. Therefore, efficiency was not just a desirable quality, but a necessary condition for survival. This approach required not physical strength, but a deep mind and observation skills. It was necessary to think before acting. It was necessary to find the most elegant and least costly solution for any task. In our modern civilization, we often take the opposite approach. We solve problems head-on using excessive power and resources. We are willing to expend enormous amounts of energy to achieve even insignificant results. The experience of indigenous peoples teaches us otherwise. It teaches us to think like nature, economically, efficiently, and wisely. It shows that the best solution is not always the most complex and technologically advanced. That is why their methods of survival are so impressive. There is nothing superfluous about them. Every detail, every element has its own meaning and is aimed at achieving the goal in the shortest possible way. This philosophy of minimalism and efficiency is perhaps the main lesson we can learn from their legacy. It is a lesson in how to live in harmony with the world, rather than in constant struggle with it. And this lesson is more relevant today than ever before. We have looked at just a few of the many ingenious techniques that allowed indigenous peoples not only to survive, but to thrive in the harshest winter conditions. Behind each of these methods lies not just ingenuity, but a deep philosophy of respect for nature and understanding of its laws. Snowshoes, snow goggles, snow shelters. All these are parts of a single system honed over millennia. These stories show that the human mind, armed with observation and patience, is capable of finding a way out of any situation. They prove that the most effective solutions are often the simplest. The experience of these people is an invaluable legacy, reminding us that true wealth lies not in technology, but in knowledge. What other topics related to the life and customs of indigenous peoples would you like to see on our channel? Share your ideas in the comments. We read all your suggestions. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new episodes.